Можно не надо, я не хочу это вспоминать.
Культоголик. Халк Хоган сдал дублых Hall of Fame Ring. Worst Wrestling Storylines Ever. Что-то было такое. Что-то такое реально в TNA было, ё-моё.
А что было?
Ну, что увидим. Так.
Ну вот, а так про Еву Мари лучше, пусть она вот в третьесортных там сериалах снимается, вот, да, ей идет. Я когда увидел, как она сыт на другую девушку в одном из сериалов, охуел, и такой, о,
Кого?
прикол. Было. Вот так вот.
Кого? Чё ты видел?
Это продолжение, короче, ну, этот сериал, это, короче, продолжение фильма, где снимался Голдберг, вот, с фразой «Если говно попадает на вентилятор, я вентилятор, блядь».
Я понял.
Вот, да.
Ну, поехали.
Короче, прикол.
Monster is a character so dominant and ruthless whose immense aura increases with every body added to the pile in their wake. An irresistible force hell-bent on destruction before eventually being toppled by that one plucky babyface who declines to say die. But what happens after? During the territories, you simply gave them a handshake and a ham sandwich and then sent them to the next town. In the rock and wrestling era, you usually fed them to Hulk Hogan and then repackaged them. But during the broadcast TV era of wrestling, it's not so simple when you have countless hours of TV time to fill each week with your roster. You could build your monster up again, sure. But again, they'd have to taste defeat at some point. And with each loss, that aura and that mystique diminishes just a tad. It happened to Kane, it happened to Vader, to the Great Khali, to Yokozuna, and to Abyss. Now, Abyss was so deranged and such a monster that his name was literally the Monster Abyss. But after too many losses, TNA needed to...
Ну, они пытались что-то делать в TNA с Абиссом, на самом деле. Там это сторилайн с Джозефом Парком, там вот эта вся хуйня, что он литерали, типа, блядь, превращается в Абисса, когда видит кровь, вот это все. Ну, что-то они какую-то... Хоть немного интерес они пытались держать к Абиссу, на самом-то деле.
Him up a little bit, add some layers, some new dimensions to his character, and make fans care about him again. Unfortunately, this was in 2010 and there were a couple of new sheriffs in town and they knew exactly what to do with Abyss, and all they needed was a magical ring. The jewelry kind, that is. I'm Fraser Porter and this is Worst Storylines Ever.
Где там надписи смешные. Топ-хейтер, будущий Сина, волшебник, трус, магическое кольцо. Пятизвездочный классик.
Abyss first appeared in TNA in 2003, having previously worked for the company as Justice. He feuded with top stars like Raven, AJ Styles, and Jeff Hardy, and had his own signature match, the Monsters Ball. In 2006, he won the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship by beating Sting by DQ. Then he lost it in a triple threat match without being pinned. It was during his World Championship run that more of his character was fleshed out, including the revelation that Big Old Abyss had served time in prison for shooting his dad 3 times in the back with a gun, not a wrestling shoot. Then it was revealed it was actually his mother who shot his dad, and Abyss had taken the rap to protect her. So far, so usual storyline monster pro wrestling bollocks, to be honest. The big mad lad would then slowly slip down the card, warring with Matt Morgan and Dr. Stevie Richards, with Mick Foley and Raven getting involved in the latter storyline. His aura would diminish and his psychotic streak would wear off, with Abyss becoming basically a quivering nervous wreck, all 6'8" of him,
Егор, как время свободное будет, можешь, пожалуйста, глянуть, какой номер серии в следующую, а то я чутка запутался. Ну, давай после
covered
видоса.
in barbed wire scars and the like. Then
Yes,
old
cheers,
Father
that's
Time
what-
had told us that 2009 had drawn to an end and that 2010 was here. A new year, a new decade, and for TNA, an exciting future as Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff rode into town for a new Monday Night War. Best of luck with that one. Bischoff instantly took a disliking to Abyss, trying to unmask him on Impact with the help of several hired goons. Luckily for Abyss, Hulk Hogan had made the save. If only he'd been there in WCW to save Rey Mysterio Jr., Juventud Guerrera, and Psychosis, etc., etc. Hogan took a shine to Abyss, but was fuming that a neurotic mess whimpered where once a feared monster stood. Abyss needed to find himself again. More importantly, he needed to say his prayers, eat his vitamins, and embrace the power of Hulkamania. Believing Abyss could become a wrestling god, Hogan told him the following. Do you know who Superman is? Well, he's got a cape. He makes him real powerful. Do you know who Popeye is? Well, he's got a can of spinach. Makes him real strong. Well, Abyss was also 36 years old, by the way, at this point. Hogan then asked Abyss if he was a monster, before cutting him off and telling him he wasn't, but that Hulk Hogan was because he had the power of Hulkamania. You know, I thought Hogan famously fought the monsters, not was one.
Hogan буквально мотиватор
Hogan was
Абисса.
geeing up Abyss to get him to snap out of this malaise.
Мне кажется,
and Abyss
или
was
нет?
fired up. Then
Что тебе кажется?
Я, конечно, ну, как тут я, ну, то, что челик, ну, не посередине кадра, а чуть, ну, левее.
Ну, бывает.
quivering in disbelief when Hogan took off his Hall of Fame ring and showed it to him. I mean, it's just a ring that many in the industry have. That's not downplaying the accolade of being in the Hall of Fame, by the way. Just more of a fact that if you're an established pro wrestler on weekly TV, you'll have seen many of these rings in the flesh. It's not like a regular Joe bumping into Jim Henson and him pulling out Kermit the Frog and being like, my little green mate wants to say hello. That'd be class. But no, Abyss could not believe his eyes when Hogan pulled off this ring. The ring that had been on his hand in plain sight the entire time, and explained that the ring represented his life and sacrifices. Abyss then was in shock and disbelief as Hogan gifted him the ring, as Hogan promised it would protect, love, and guide him, and would make him 10 times stronger than Hulk Hogan ever was.
Ну, то есть буквально магическое кольцо Зала Славы.
First of all, you've got this monster, wide-eyed and quivering like a 6-year-old boy on Christmas morning, unable to believe that Hogan had given him some jewelry. This was a man who, lest we forget, had kayfabe served prison time for attempted murder and used all manners of glass, barbed wire, thumbtacks, and the like to maim whoever got in his way. Now he was decidedly giddy at receiving a gift. To make the lazy comparison, imagine masked Killer Kane giggling with glee as Harley Race gave him a trophy. It'd be crap. We can all admit that it would be crap. Second of all, this was the era where TNA was positioning itself as a rival of WWE after spending years growing a dedicated fan base by doing what WWE wouldn't or couldn't do, presenting an alternative. Yet here they were on TV basically saying, yeah, Mr. TNA Original, this place is fine and all, and you may have held the 10 pounds of gold, but this WWE accolade from Vince McMahon is 10,000 times more relevant and important.
Ну, есть такое, да, такой момент есть, что, типа, вот мы вроде как, типа, наравне с ВВЕ, конкуренты, но, блядь, все, что у тебя было, это хуйня. Ты должен трепетать перед кольцом Зала Славы ВВЕ.
It's not a good look. For all that AEW gets bashed in the modern era for taking jabs at WWE, and how WWF and WCW were lambasted for taking public shots at one another in the 90s, both are certainly better than TNA basically kissing WWE's arse. Doubly so when you realise that the bum licking was unintentional, and during a ratings war between the two sides. Behind the scenes, Hogan apparently envisioned Abyss becoming TNA's answer to John Cena, a never-say-die babyface who could be a hero to millions of children, teaching them the values of trying your best and never giving up. Again, This was Abyss, a character who was more likely to eat a child than teach it life lessons. Now, Abyss had indeed been immensely popular in TNA as both a face and a heel. The problem was, he couldn't be turned into a Hogan or Cena figure, no matter how hard you tried. There was too much backstory.
Я пока из его повествования не увидел, чтобы из него прям пытались сделать Сину. Ну, то есть, я увидел, что вот Хоган его мотивирует, дает ему, блять, волшебное кольцо, которое направляет тебя, делать сильнее, все такое, но именно что из него делают свою версию Сины, я что-то не увидел вот из того, как он повествовал, пока не знаю.
Too many kayfabe bad deeds. Plus the fact he was a masked, scarred, tattooed lunatic in psych ward overalls. Like, imagine if Disney remade the Santa Claus, but it starred Jason Voorhees. It wouldn't work as intended, would it? TNA got big in the late 2000s by being an alternative to WWE and its family-friendly march into PG land, with Cena flying front and center, flying McMahon's sports entertainment flag. Whilst attracting a young, enthusiastic, merch-buying fan base is important for any wrestling promotion, you don't want to completely bin off everything that brought you to the dance in the first place, especially not in a vain grasp for their attention. It'd be like Hogan and Bischoff deciding to dilute the X Division, or scrapping the six-sided ring.
Yeah.
So Abyss now had the ring, and when that plucky little boy put on the ring, he became wrestling's answer to the Green Lantern. Just absolutely bodying everyone with superhuman strength and power. That's the 6'8", 350-pound plucky little boy just to get you back up to speed. It wasn't just Eric Bischoff who, at least in kayfabe, didn't like Hogan and Abyss's little loving. With the equally mismatched pair of TNA World Champion AJ, I'm a devoted family man who's a student of the craft styles, and Rick, I allegedly repeatedly get thrown out of bars for pissing my trousers, Flair battering Hogan and leaving him in a pool of blood. Flair was apparently fuming that Abyss had been given Hogan's ring and not AJ. If only Flair had a ring of his own. Actually, no, this is already stupid enough. It's a stupid suggestion. I'm gonna walk that one back. This led to March 8th edition of Impact, the first edition of the show since its permanent move to Monday nights, and such a monumental night needed a monumental match, and would open with the TNA in-ring debut of Hogan, as he and Abyss teamed up to take on the Nature Boys. Abyss and Hogan came out to Hogan.
Бля, смотрите, какая охуенная фотка у Абиса. Они как будто прифотошопили этот кулак, потому что он выглядит больше, чем его голова. Типа, я понимаю, почему это так, почему такой кадр, но просто это выглядит тупо. Это выглядит очень тупо. Типа, у всех маленькие руки, у него такая вот здоровенная.
Teamed up to take on the Nature Boys. Abyss and Hogan came out to Hogan's music, of course, and Dixie Carter beamed from the crowd while having not a single clue what was going on. I mean, let's just look at the mismatch here. Hogan in the red and yellow, feather boa, freshly trimmed mustache and beard. And Abyss, sweaty, in black rags, greasy hair across his mask. At least the anarchy symbol on his back was red and yellow. So the match starts and Abyss is wearing the ring and trying to punch Styles in the face. First off, referee, do your job. Not only confiscate the ring, but like smelt it down so this storyline can be done with now. 2 minutes later, Styles and Flair are in control. Sting returns out of nowhere to aid the faces despite no glaring rule breaking going on, and then decides to batter Hogan and Abyss with the baseball bat. AJ and Flair start swinging chairs, Hogan blades, Sting buggers off, Hogan grabs a mic and demands the match continue later in the night. Again, referee, do your job and restore some order here. When the match resumes at the end of the show, they have a new referee. And it's only bloody Errol Hebner. This time it was no DQ rule, so obviously Flair bladed, Hulk Hogan bladed again, Brooke Hogan cried from the crowd, and the deathmatch legend Abyss patiently waited on the apron for the hot tag. When he finally got in the ring, he did clubbing blows and clotheslines and then hulked up to no reaction before hitting the black hole slam on Styles for the win. Then the faces celebrated to Hogan's music before Desmond Wolfe twatted them both with chairs.
Блин, ну есть, да, ощущение. Все еще не вижу тут, ну прям Сину, нового Хогана, но есть ощущение, что Абис какой-то прям лишний, что, ну, какой-то другой человек, наверное, должен был отыгрывать всю эту роль, не Абис. Есть
Thank you,
такое.
Nigel. It's worth noting that this was Flair's first televised match since his perfect retirement at Shawn Michaels' hands at WrestleMania 24. Just gonna let that breathe for a second. This was his first match back after that perfect retirement. This.
Да.
Retirement.
Да.
This was the first match.
Да.
The first one.
Да,
To
да.
go back to Hogan's apparent dream of making Abyss the next Cena, it was clear that he just wanted him to be a Hulk Hogan cosplayer. And so I present the case that in this era, Abyss was not TNA's John Cena, but was instead TNA's Eugene. I think no further questions are needed at this time. Abyss was a great performer and deserving of his position as a main event player in TNA. But the face of the company, he doesn't even have a face. This was during a time when the TNA roster included the aforementioned Desmond Wolfe, D'Angelo De Niro, the Motor City Machine Guns, Samoa Joe, Jay Lethal, Eric Young, Jeff Hardy. Any of these could have been positioned as the ultra face of the promotion. As could have, you know, AJ Styles.
Опять же, не до конца понимаю, откуда он взял, что Абис лицо промоушена. Ну, почему? Откуда он взял, что Абис, в понимании букеров TNA, это лицо промоушена? Что он двигается с Халком Хоганом? Не знаю, он же даже не мировой чемпион, блять, схуяли он лицо промоушена? Вот это я что-то тоже не до конца понимаю. Ну да, в этом сторилайне он кажется странным. Типа, лишним, есть такое.
The phenomenal one? But no. Hogan and Bischoff thought Styles had no character, and thus started the long road out of the door for AJ, who went to New Japan in 2014 and never looked back. We even noted...
Есть такое, да, опять же, потому что есть такой эффект Манделы у многих фанатов, я про это уже говорил когда-то. Якобы AJ Styles какой-то супер мейн-ивентер TNA, лицо TNA, что вообще не является правдой совсем. От слова, блять, совсем. Лицом промоушена, главным человеком в промоушене он был в свой последний год пребывания в TNA. Где-то так. Но он никогда не был лицом промоушена. Никогда. Ни разу. То есть ёбаный Джефф Джеррет. Больше лицо промоушена. Сама Джо больше лицо промоушена. Курт Энгл, Стинг. Кто угодно, блять, но не AJ Styles.
How Sting returned during this era, and we would see 10 years later how to effectively do a protege angle with Sting and Darby Allin's run in AEW. It was a great way to inject legendary aura into the show while allowing a younger star to bask in their heat and to develop in their own way as a complement to the established act. Enough about something that's actually good. Back to TNA in 2010. Abyss would face Styles for the TNA World Championship at Destination X a few weeks later in a match where Abyss was so supercharged that he chokeslammed Styles through the ring. Okay, I will admit, as a kid watching this on Challenge, it was pretty cool. It's just a shame that it caused the match to be thrown out by Earl Hebner. For all his positioning as the next Cena, Abyss, well, he wasn't even on the poster. Styles would then move on to a few...
Может быть, из-за этого его не позиционировали как Сида. Я вот этот момент не понимаю. То есть, смотри, он не мировой чемпион. Его нет даже на постере. Он не в мейн-ивентах особо. Ну, и он не главное лицо. Так, я не знаю, мне надо стрим возобновлять или нет? Вкл-выкл мне надо делать?
Еще. Чекаю.
Окей.
Блять. Ну, пукает. Пока. Прогружается. Ну-ка, шо во ВКонтакте? В социальной сети?
Скорее всего, все ок.
А там действительно все ок.
Ну вот ВК Лайф в этом плане хуже, да. Бля, неужели вкл-выкл? Отстой, за твою запись делится на две части. Ладно, сейчас сделаю вкл-выкл. Заебал этой Батори, этот Кен ёбаный, вся вот эта хуйня.
Реально. Приезжаем в Казахстан.
Так, ждем, пока напишут, в эфире мы чи не.
У меня пока пукает.
Сидим, бздим. Пока сидим и бздим.
Ну-ка, в паблике.
В паблике-то по-любому все хорошо. Паблику, на удивление,
В
да.
паблике, да.
Там типа сразу устанавливается само, а тут, блять, надо все мозги себе выебать, чтобы восстановить стрим, если по ходу стрима упало. Да. Людей-то больше в ВК-лайве смотрят, поэтому там в первую очередь восстанавливать. Ну, бля, ну я сделал вкл-выкл, что тебе еще надо от меня, блядь, залупа?
Ну, подольше, пока там сигнал дойдет, блядь. До ВК лайва, блядь. Да. Тебя, блядь, он меня прогрузил там, где ты про постер говоришь. Сука, дебил, блядь. Порылый нахуй.
Все, типа, блядь, в ВК-лайве нет стрима, блядь, и не будет, или что? Мне снова вкл-выкл делать, чешу.
О, подожди.
Так.
Пропукал.
Ёб твою
Слушай,
мать.
нормально, у меня загрузил. А у меня все.
Ёб твою мать. Алло.
Проперделась, тетя пишет.
Отлично. Просто, чтобы вы понимали, все это время я ничего не делал. Я один раз нажал вкл-выкл, после этого несколько минут просто мы ждали, пока странный ВК-лайв додумается, что, ну, стрим идет, что все в порядке.
Да.
Просто пиздец, блядь.
База.
Охуенно. Так вот, да, на чем я остановился. То есть, смотри, вот этот чел сам говорит. Абиса нет на постере ППВ. Абис не мировой чемпион на тот момент в TNA. Он не главное лицо сторилайнов. И из этого всего он делает вывод, что его неудачно пытаются сделать буквально своим Джоном Синой. Почему, блять, он делает такой вывод? На основе чего он делает вывод, что его делают буквально своим Джоном Синой? Я не понимаю этот момент вот в этом видосе.
Хуй знает.
Просто как он до этого вывода дошел? Исходя из чего? Я вообще этого не понимаю. То есть он сам говорит, вы делаете его Джоном Синой, но он даже не на постере, вы тупые, типа. Так может его и не делают Джоном Синой, поэтому его нет на постере. Типа, вы делаете его Джоном Синой, но он даже не мировой чемпион. Так может поэтому его и не делают Джоном Синой. Ёбаный ты дурак, блядь. Схуяли, откуда ты этого Джона Сину высрал вообще? Почему, блядь?
With D'Angelo De Niro over the title, but Flair still had a bone to pick with Hogan. And Abyss, you shouldn't forget about him either. First, the Abyss captain Team Hogan defeated the Sting captain Team Flair in an 8-man cage match at Lockdown. Abyss wasn't featured on the poster once again. Forget not about being featured on the pay-per-view posters. Abyss was barely featured on the opening video for Impact. Just two blink and you'll miss it shots that didn't even show his face was all the next Cena.
Но при этом он Cena, да.
Eric Bischoff and Shannon Dilligaff Moore got more airtime. On the April 26th edition of Impact, Flair and Abyss would wrestle a main event singles match with both Flair and Hogan's Hall of Fame rings on the line. Earlier in the show, Flair and Hogan jaw-jacked on the mic while AJ Styles and new TNA World Champion RVD also went back and forth. Abyss must have been in the back shaking with glee at getting a copy of the Beano and a big lolly for doing well in school or something. Hogan giving him a little treat. When we did catch up with Abyss backstage, he wondered why Flair didn't pass his ring to Styles and pass the torch. Is that really what Hogan did though, Abyss? Abyss did admit that the ring didn't have magical powers, scoffing at that notion and saying he saw it as a token of Hogan's belief in him. Okay, this kind of worked. This made sense, and this was a story beat most fans could get behind. And then Abyss had to ask Flair what.
Я так понял, из-за того, что в его сторилайне он продвигает идею, что нужно верить в себя, не сдаваться, и этому его учил Хоган. Ну, типа, опять же, это есть такой момент, что эта роль не подходит Абису. Просто Джон Сина, ну, не только Джон Сина про это, любой, блядь, андердог бэйби-фейс про это, вообще любой, из любого положения в карде. Из лоу-карда, из любой джобер бэйби-фейс, мид-кардер, аппер-кардер, мейн-мейнер, любой, блядь, фейс про это, по идее. Особенно андердог. Он мог бы, блядь, сказать, вот, Абис это буквально новый Харрикейн Хелмс, нахуй, я не знаю. Они пытаются сделать его Харрикейн Хелмса, ебать. Это так же глупо звучало бы, как и то, что это буквально они пытаются из него сделать Сина. Так может они никого не пытались сделать из Абиса? Может они пытались сделать из Абиса просто в новом гиммике? Нет, при чем тут Сина? Какой нахуй Сина? Чё к чему?
What you gonna do when I take the ring from you? TNA's Eugene. I'll say it again. He's TNA's Eugene. TNA also aired a candid video of Flair softly talking backstage from the doctor's office, comparing himself to an old gunfighter that just didn't know when to call it a day. He said that Abyss wearing the Hall of Fame ring was offensive to him and made a mockery of everything he'd worked for in the prior 38 years. It was almost babyface-esque, tragic even, like Randy the Ram in The Wrestler. But again, Flair was the heel. Abyss was the babyface, and they were feuding over a legacy prize from a rival organization. It's worth noting here that Abyss still continued to wrestle in dingy black gear, yes, with the Hogan flourishes and all, and walked to the ring in a big hoodie. What we haven't mentioned thus far was that TNA changed his music to Hogan's American-made WCW theme from 1995. Abyss, American-made in 2010.
Опять просто для того, чтобы, ну, понимание было, если это, ну, вряд ли он врет об этом. Поэтому давайте, Халк Хоган, American Made. Просто, ну, чтобы вы понимали, какая ему тема была у Абиса, если это правда. Тема American Made это вот это. Бля, я хочу увидеть, какая Абис выходит под American Made. Есть на ютубе видео, какая Абис под это выходит? Да нет. Фотки. Походу, да, действительно была у него такая. Это все очень странно. Кстати, еще заметил, обрати внимание, типа куча одинаковых видосов, буквально одни и те же, заливают разные каналы. Раз, два, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Это все разные каналы. Что происходит?
Братан, в сфере шортсов, в сфере вот таких вот видосов, забей, блядь, это
В
нормально.
сфере шортсов 15 лет назад все это было залито.
Ну, я говорю, в плане вот обычных вот таких видиков, это,
Ой,
блядь,
нахуй
стандартная
шортсов.
история.
Чё шортсы вообще?
Ну, я имею в виду...
Было в момент, когда на ютубе, блядь, 3 человека сидело, пишут шортсы вообще.
I'm not for one second suggesting that Abyss is not a proud American. But you wouldn't exactly call him the most patriotic character in wrestling history. The mismatches just keep on mismatching, brother. Anyway, Abyss and Flair wrestled for about 3 minutes. Flair obviously started pissing blood after 45 seconds. Errol Hebner got kicked in the balls. Good. Flair used brass knuckles despite both men wrestling with big solid rings on their fists, and got the win after blasting Abyss in the plums. But wait, Errol Hebner noticed the brass knucks and had a shoving match with Flair because he just always has to get himself over. Anyway, he restarted the match. Abyss hulked up to literally 0 pop, did the Hogan U, and then got the win after a black hole slam, winning Flair's ring. Abyss then celebrated to Hogan's NWO rip-off theme as the Hulkster came down and the two stood on Flair's bleeding head and mugged him off. These are the baby faces. It shouldn't be a surprise to say that this episode of Impact did record low viewing numbers. The second Monday Night Wars were a bust, and WWE were laughing all the way to the Hall of Fame. Oh yeah, just realised, this feud happened in late March, during WrestleMania and Hall of Fame season? Absolute idiots. On the next episode of Impact, Hogan gave Flair's ring to Jay Lethal, which, to be honest, I can get on board with, as it led to some absolute magic between Lethal and Flair. Abyss, on the other hand, would quietly give up Hogan's ring. TNA then decided to allow the audience their chance to have their opinions heard, with Eric Bischoff introducing an online
Почему почти каждая женщина в TNA выглядела как женщина из порно тех лет, блять? Почему?
voting system where the fans could vote for who they wanted to face the world champion. Desmond Wolfe won every week. Abyss came last every week. TNA said, these marks know nothing. They ignored the voting, stopped pushing Desmond Wolfe, and thrust Abyss back into the main event to a ton of apathy from the fans. Luckily, just a few months later, Abyss would bludgeon RVD to death with a big bat of wood full of nails, or Janice, to use her given name. It's safe to say that the new Cena experiment was a complete bust, but the big lad and Hogan would remain cordial on TNA TV, but that is a story for another time.
Да,